So looking ahead at the position that you're running for as the state comptroller, what are questions folks are asking about, not only about the candidates, but about the office itself?
The only way you know how to fix and improve an agency or the issues you've got is somebody's got to tell you, and you've got to ask the questions. People should know, do you have relationships with the legislature? What do those relationships look like? Do they trust you? I would say yes in my instance, because I've been working at the Railroad Commission, and I think those are some key issues.
Ready to roll?
Yep.
All right.
Real Texan.
Why should this matter to Real Texans? Hey, welcome to this edition of Real Texans, where we chat with men and women doing great things for the Lone Star State, which sometimes includes visiting with folks who hold and seek office. So I'm excited to sit down with someone who's actually doing both at the moment, Christi Craddick, a member of the Railroad Commission, now running for Comptroller. I have to say, Commissioner Craddick, it is it's interesting. You're running for a position that most people don't really fully understand, despite its importance, what it does, running for a position that's very important that most people don't fully understand.
That's right.
You're like a glutton for punishment. You're not seeking the fun, sexy things that get the front page headlines. You're holding an office that most folks, despite it impacting the state in a meaningful way, don't understand. And you're running for an office that, despite impacting the state, so
that's true.
You're kind of a glutton for punishment that way, I guess.
I don't know that I'm a glutton for punishment. It's been, so
if you win, you've got work to do.
And there's always work to do, and I think that's why it's important to hold these offices. So we've laughed. If you're out in Midland, Texas, everybody knows who the Railroad Commission is, and nobody knows what the Comptroller does. And if you're in other parts of the state, it might be the opposite, right? So I've been laughing. If you're in the oil and gas world, you know how important the Railroad Commission is. You know how important it's been, and I've been there 13 plus years. And it's a great agency. I've said it's the most important agency because we're regulating 35% of the state's economy, and we're bringing the money in. Moving to the Comptroller's office, you get to look at every single piece of general revenue, and you're putting the money out the door. And so both are very, very important offices. And I'm excited for one. I'm excited to have been at one and excited to move to the next one.
So I'm talking about your background. You mentioned Midland. You grew up in Midland. It's impossible to talk to you without mentioning a little bit about your family. Your dad is Tom Craddick, former Speaker of the House, long-serving member of the legislature. In fact, he'd already been in the legislature a session or two when you were born.
I was born in session 2, actually.
So you've grown up.
That's right.
In with Dad being involved, and in many ways, your mom also very involved. Walk me through kind of how that impacted you. It seems like for some people that would make them go running, screaming, hair on fire away from that life. But you've embraced it.
I haven't. Let me say, I was going to run, scream, hair on fire because you couldn't make any money doing this. And that's exactly still true. But look, my parents are both very involved in Midland and across the state. Being a volunteer or doing something good for your community is important, and that's how I was raised. And so my first Republican state convention, I was actually 12 and loved the political piece, but wasn't going to run for office, by the way. But if you look at both of what my parents do, my dad was, I think, the most conservative speaker. He flipped it on its head in the state.
Right.
We became Republican finally across the state, and he worked hard for that. But just in his community, he'd worked hard to make sure that Midland is still the leader across the state in a lot of things. In fact, mental health has become his new passion because it's my mother's new passion, by the way. She's very involved in the hospital and very involved in healthcare. And she was president of both PTAs at one point for my brother and I. So I grew up watching two parents be very engaged and look for changes of what they could do, smart things for not just their community, but across the state. So when it was time for me to figure out what I wanted to do for a living and what I wanted to do for life, I went to law school because that seemed to be a good background, and I got in there, and the joke is, and while I am a lawyer and I am a practicing lawyer, that I decided law school wasn't necessarily my thing. And it's not everybody's thing, by the way. And my roommate was going to be a trial lawyer, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. I don't want to do that. So I ended up going and doing grassroots and grassroots advocacy and getting involved that way because I felt like that was an important step to get communities involved in what goes on. So that's the direction I was going for a while. And then I looked at the Railroad Commission, and it really was this, and it was up for sunset. So I'm sure your listeners probably know, but as an agency, most agencies have to go through what a sunset process is, meaning the legislature goes and audits you and makes sure you should be an agency anymore. And this agency was in it in 2010, 2011, and nobody was paying attention to this agency. And I looked at it and said to my parents, we're in the beginning of an upswing. Barnett Shale had already happened. We were already drilling again and using horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing. Not new to this state, by the way, but we're already using it more aggressively again. And when 2 seats became available in 2011, and I'd been watching the agency for sunset for some clients, and there were some issues. Nobody's paying attention. We weren't communicating well. The IT was very old at the time. We're almost done with that. I'll get back into that in a minute. But there was some opportunity and so my dad said, 2 aren't going to run. I said, I might want to. And my mother was getting ready to sit down in a chair and almost missed the chair, right? Because she went, you're going to run? I went, yeah, I think I can fix things. I think that people need to go in and fix and pay attention to agencies, be a leader, explain what we do. So it's been, had no idea that I'd be here. I was not the one going to run for office.
So you mentioned that you were a practicing attorney, but not trial attorney, and that a lot of that part of your career did focus on oil and gas. So,
right.
And you were doing a lot of public education around the oil and gas industry. The oil and gas still accounts for, as you noted, 35% of the state's economy. Moving from that to the Comptroller feels like, in some ways, worlds apart. But in fact, both agencies spend a lot of time dealing with kind of the lifeblood of state government and making sure things are operating efficiently. So the Road Commission, not to blow smoke at you, but the Road Commission was seen as kind of a graveyard agency for a period of time, and it's now become a lot more efficient and a lot more effective in working with both those individuals who are struggling maybe with problems with bad actors, as well as working with the good industry players. How's the experience the Road Commission translate over to the Comptroller?
Well, so I think certain things you've got to look at. One, you've got to run an efficient, effective agency and be more transparent. So I mentioned a minute ago, IT.
Right.
I think that's a big piece for anybody. We all live in it every day. But as agencies, we always get behind. So when I walked into the Railroad Commission, a lot of people wanted to know what was going on in the oil and gas world. We were on a mainframe with Fortran. And if you don't know what that is, you don't have enough gray hair. So let's start with that.
Right.
And 2, we as an agency, like if you wanted to be on our public information, we wouldn't allow you because we were on it and you were crashing our system. I mean, real problems. And so I went in and said, look, this isn't smart. We ought to be using dollars and going and asking for dollars to upgrade our system. It'll make us more efficient, number one, and much more transparent so people can see what we're doing as an agency. So we're in the last phase. It took us a while to A, go explain to the legislature who we were, and B, how important we were. And we went through a few downturns in the middle, but we're in the last cycle of getting those dollars, and we've gone to cloud. So we're really excited. And if you go look at our website now, you can tell where every single well is. It's been much more efficient. You as an operator within the agency, if you're working with us, you file everything online. Everything was in hard copy when I got there. So when you ask, where's the translation? You've got to translate the same philosophy of efficiency, looking at technology, auditing yourself of what your people do, how you use your dollars efficiently. And so at the Railroad Commission, one of the things that we're the only agency who has this going on. We're fee-based as an agency.
Right.
Which is fine when the oil and gas industry is doing well. We bring in more permitting dollars. It's not been so great in certain downturns, and I've been through a couple of them, and one of them being COVID, the latest one. If you're looking at if you're fee-based, we were off 75% in the number of drilling permits we put out during COVID, which meant my budget went down 30%. You got to live in your budget. So moving over to the Comptroller's office, every dollar that is general revenue comes and every payment comes through that agency. If somebody's not living within their budget, or you're not paying attention to what the fraud, waste, and abuse you could be having that way, those all translate. You've got to know how to run a budget and run an agency. So we've been really effective, and we joke that the Railroad Commission's done such a good job. The legislature keeps giving us more stuff to do, and we say, okay, great, but make sure we've got some dollars because there's a cost for us. But we've grown, and I think our stature's grown, as you said. We're not one of those that we've been part of a solution, looking for solutions as an agency, not just sitting there doing our job, but working with people, and I think that's really important.
So looking ahead at the position that you're running for as the state comptroller, again, this is a position that a lot of folks don't understand. As you know, that the money comes in and it goes out. All state dollars pass through the comptroller's office in one way, shape, form, or another. What are things that excite you about the position? What are some of the challenges you see sitting there?
Look, I think I'm going to start with the challenges because I think challenges kind of excite me first and foremost. So challenge number one, where are we really spending our dollars? And so we've had some people talk to me about audits. We all think of audits with the IRS, which are awful and nobody wants to have those. But the comptroller's office, if you're a taxpayer and you pay dollars, we may, as an agency, go in and audit you. Comptroller's office does. Some of those audits are taking 5 years. That's worse than IRS. And then at the same time, you should be getting dollars back because you're going to reinvest them is the way I look at it. So I think we need to be more efficient in the audit world. That's really important, not just to me, but it's important to make sure business continues to come into the state. Making sure we know where the tax dollars really are going. Like I said, we ought to be looking every single day, and I'm not sure that we have an active process in the comptroller's office. Do we go in and look if you, an agency, present your fees and what are we doing with the dollars? Are there cost savings that we can return to taxpayers or we just don't charge those fees? Let's start. Why should you pay something you don't owe to begin with, right? So I think some of those are just common sense ways of doing things, getting people back to work. Some days the auditors are doing it all by phone. Maybe that makes sense. Maybe it doesn't. I like to see people, so I think that's important. So I think and finding and keeping good people. There are a lot of people at this agency. Do we have the right people in the right place? Are we giving them authority to do work? Are we making it harder for the taxpayer? If we are, we need to be making it easier. And one of the things I think we've always had the philosophy at the Railroad Commission, and I think it ought to go to every state agency. We as an agency work for you. You don't work for us.
Looking at the comptroller, obviously it covers, again,
everything.
We cannot oversay this enough times. It looks at everything in state government. Nothing escapes the dealing with the comptroller, whether you like it or not, in state government. But there are some things that maybe touch a lot of people more than others. The comptroller, it's an area that most folks don't fully understand, is the role the comptroller has in property taxes. Talk through how you think the comptroller's office could be better used in helping citizens with the perpetual problem of our property tax.
Well, so first and foremost, I think you got to go look for cost savings that the taxpayers already pay currently to the state and see if those dollars are available to go back to the legislature and say, look, we found cost savings. You can as a policy can do what you want with them. I think two, I think you've got to give good numbers. And I think one of the things that the comptroller does, as a lot of people may know this, they give the budget estimates every year and they have to tell the legislature what they have to spend. If you don't give good numbers, they can't make good policy decisions. And so I think that's important to make sure you've got good numbers and know, yes, this is going to come in, this isn't, and be transparent with the legislature. And the third piece that we've looked at, and I went back, you always learn when when you've been around for a while, you go back and ask some folks like John Sharp, who's been at your Aggie world for a while and is leaving actually today. And so you go ask and you say, would you do well or what didn't you do well? And one of the things that I've talked to him about and gone back and asked others who come before, why aren't we auditing local government groups? So, for instance, you as a school board, look, $1 billion is a lot of money. A lot of school boards, that's a lot of money for people to understand. These are small business owners. These are people who don't necessarily make $1 billion, but they're going to put a bond out. It's going to cost you and me dollars. Do they need the $1 billion? Do we need to go audit that school district, look and see where they can find some cost savings, show them those dollars before they put the bond out? Maybe it lowers it. And two, as you've done that audit and they get to put the bond out, that's their right. But what's it cost? What's the rate going to be? And how does that increase your taxes? Those are things we haven't been using. Those are one tool we haven't been using in many years that I think we ought to go back and use again.
Staying on the schools topic, again, there's you running for the office means you're running in the primary of March 26, the general election November 26, taking office in early January 27.
That's right.
So you're running in the race that will come in 27. Between now and then, the acting comptroller is charged with kind of putting together the school choice program, $1 billion program. But the next comptroller will be the one who has to make sure it works and make sure that it's a $1 billion program. Again, one of those areas that most normal people, the 30 million Texans don't really have to interact with the comptroller much. But now with the school choice program, a lot more people will be interacting directly with the comptroller. What do you want to do with that program that the legislature has now created?
Well, first and foremost, it needs to be very efficient. So a lot of people have been fighting for school choice for 30 years.
First time I ever heard your dad speak, he spoke about school choice.
He's been in the fight for years and years, and as a policy decision, I think it's a great decision for the state. We've got to implement it well as a state or nobody's going to like what they did. $1 billion is a lot of money. There aren't a lot of guardrails, to be really honest, and I think you've got to make sure at the comptroller you're spending it efficiently, that there's no fraud and waste, that people you're transparent how those dollars are going. So you're talking about right now, actually, the contracts, the bids have gone out to get people to contract. They've already put them out. Frankly, if that is not in place and their program's not in place by next March to April, it's not ready to go for the 26-27 school year. It's a fast turn, so I hope they do it well and do it right so I don't have to go clean it up. And if they do, great, let's continue it. But part of what you've got to do in this, and it's in the bill, is market. That's now become a norm for other states. Like Florida's doing it really well. If you go look, if they're implementing programs, they put a marketing program. I'm not sure that's what government's ever done, but again, I think that's outreach, and it's outreach to people that, you're right, never hear or didn't know who the comptroller was. So as an agency, you're going to have to educate people, A, what you do, and B, educate them about a program and how it can help them or help their kid. So I think that's going to be really important, but making sure those dollars are spent efficiently and effectively and go to the right families, go to the right schools, and are done well, and we don't have waste is going to be a priority.
Former comptrollers Combs and Hager both put an emphasis on taking what was often the dry technical reports of the comptroller's office and moving this, I think, in a lot of ways started with Sharp, and then Combs continued this, but the idea of a more accessible reporting for the public, a lot more data that people can digest. I'm thinking particularly of the state checkbook, putting all the expenses online, and Comptroller Combs did. How do you see those programs continuing under a Christi Craddick comptroller?
I think more transparency is really important, and so I would continue those programs, relook at and see what people are, if they're actually looking at anything.
Nerds like me might be the only one reading some of these reports.
Might be, and maybe there's some value. Maybe we need to change them. Every agency has to do reports. You have to reassess who's using the reports first and foremost. We at the Railroad Commission do reports too. Do people look at them? What is of value? Can we improve them? And what are other reports? So yes, I think it's those reports, regular reports, so people can see what you do, where their dollars are being spent, where there's fraud, waste, and abuse, and we've cleaned some of that up if there's some places to clean up. Yes, those are going to be important.
What are questions that you think folks should be asking of you and the other candidates in the race? What are questions folks are asking about, not only about the candidates, but about the office itself?
Well, what does the office do? I think people really do want to know that. How many employees do you have? What do you do every day? Do you have to go to the office every day? Yes, the answer is yes. Because I go to the office every day anyway. I think that if you aren't there, then you don't know what's going on, or you're out traveling every day, because we have field offices. But not only that, I joke you have to get out of Austin so you know what's really going on in the world. And so I do travel, and I think that's important to continue that, to go to these field offices. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to have conversations with not just the taxpayer who might be involved with you every day, but you want I want feedback of, what are we doing well? What aren't we doing well? How do you think we ought to fix it? What are some problems you see? And what do we do? What are the good people you like, and what people don't you like? You can tell me that on the side too. Because I always tell people, the only way you know how to fix and improve an agency or the issues you've got is somebody's got to tell you, and you've got to ask the questions. So look, I think you've got to continue to ask those questions. You've got to, people should know, do you have relationships with the legislature? What do those relationships look like? Do they trust you? I would say yes in my instance, because I've been working at the Railroad Commission, and we go give straight good numbers from when we're budgeting, for instance, or when you've got issues. So I think those are some key issues. What's your philosophy about how you run a business? Are you top down? Are you bottom up? Or are you somewhere in between? Do you trust your managers? And what type people are you going to go hire and look for? So those are some good questions. And what's your fiscal philosophy? So for me, like I said, at the Railroad Commission, we're an agency, we're fee-based. When we run out of money for a project, we just had this happen for well plugging this past year. We had so much money, we had dollars set aside for well plugging. We've also had some emergency wells in the last few years, some real challenges going on in this industry. We ran out of money on well plugging in March or early April, and we went over to the legislature and said, look, we've done what you've asked us to do. We don't have any money. If you want to give us more, fine. If not, this is all we have to spend for this project this year. We want you to be aware. They went, okay, thank you for telling us. So I think you've got to stay within your budget. And that's how I do it at my house too. I think you've got to sit down and say, okay, what are my priorities in my house? And what can I accomplish with the dollars? And I think that's what the Comptroller ought to be doing too. It's your dollars. You ought to be accountable for it.
Well, Christi Craddick, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate your service on the Railroad Commission. Appreciate you seeking the office of Comptroller. It's going to be an interesting race ahead.
It is. I think it'll be great. I think leadership's going to be important. Having run statewide and won 3 times is going to be important. You want somebody who's going to win. It's going to be an interesting cycle, so we're excited to be there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining this edition of Real Texans.